Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I am doing a tag video. I was tagged to do this video back in December, so it has been quite a while, and I really like this tag. It's different than a lot of the barrage of tag videos that have been occurring in the manga community. This one actually comes from the book community. It was created by Jen Campbell, and if you are a fiction reader or poetry reader, you should definitely go and check out her channel because she has really interesting conversation about books. And I was tagged to do this by Whimsical Pictures, and she has very interesting taste as well and very interesting conversations about books and manga in particular. So you should go and check out her channel as well. So I really like this tag. Basically it is a pairing tag. So it's about, it's not about answering questions, but it's about giving recommendations of titles that you think work well read side by side, or one after the other, or they kind of, there's some connecting force between two titles that really would enhance the reading of the other title. So I have chosen 8 titles that I'm going to recommend to you, or 8 pairs that I'm going to recommend to you. 4 of them are prose fiction paired with manga, and 4 of them are manga to manga pairings. And I just really like this tag because this is actually how I like to read. When I read something, or I watch even a TV show or something, it kind of clues me into, oh, maybe I actually want to pick out this other title that I've heard about, because it reminds me of that. Or I've read something and something in it sparks my need to read something else. So or even when I read 2 things, I like to see the connection between those things. So this is actually something that I really like about reading in general, and hopefully it's something that you'd be interested in. So I'm going to start with the prose to manga pairings, and then I'm going to do the manga to manga pairings. I will put a timestamp in the description below, so if you want to skip to whatever part, feel free to do that. Anyway, let's just get going. So the first pairing I have is Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis and Tokyo Ghoul by Sui Ishida. I've only read the first 2 volumes of Tokyo Ghoul, so I can't tell you about the rest of the series. And certainly if you've read Tokyo Ghoul, you'll have recognized that Metamorphosis is mentioned many times in those first 2 volumes, so it's an obvious reference and an obvious inspiration for the series. Metamorphosis is essentially about a man who goes to sleep and then he wakes up as a cockroach, and people don't recognize him, and he doesn't sort of fit in with the human world, but he also is not a cockroach. So it's sort of this it's sort of this surreal reality of what now, and it's sort of a similar approach to Tokyo Ghoul, where the boy becomes a half ghoul. So he is half human, half ghoul, and he doesn't really belong with humans, but he also doesn't belong with ghouls, and what does that really mean for him? So I think that the comparison is really obvious, and also really profound when you actually read the novel. And it's a very, very short novel. This is half the novel, and the other half is about notes, so I would highly recommend it. The next titles or pairings that I recommend are Limit by Keiko Suenobu and Lord of the Rings by William Golding. I think it's a pretty fair assumption that if you know anything about Lord of the Flies, then you would kind of understand what is going on in this manga, but it's just sort of the degeneration of, there's no family, they're stuck in this place alone, they're young people, it's sort of a tragedy, and how do they cope? How do they kind of create hierarchy and create a society and live together in this new way? Basically, Limit is about a class of students who are taking a trip, like a school trip. They're on a bus, and the bus goes over a cliff, and the majority of the students die except for a handful. And this handful of students are now trapped. The family don't know that they're missing. There's no way for them to communicate with their home, and they're stuck in the wilderness. And it quickly degenerates into sort of a hierarchical situation where some students believe that they are in charge, and they take charge, and not necessarily for anyone's benefit. It's a very fast-paced look at this situation. So I think that whether or not it was intended, I think that these are actually a good pairing to read together. This Lord of the Flies is definitely about a younger group of students, and they are trapped on an island for a longer time, and you know, they are kind of surviving for a longer time. This is sort of more like over a week, so there is that difference for sure, but it definitely has a same kind of theme and situation, and just sort of seeing how the situation progresses makes a lot of sense when you compare them together. This one might be a bit of a stretch, especially for most people, because it's a lot of reading for little impact. And that is Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind by Hayao Miyazaki and Homer's Odyssey. This seems like a pretty strange comparison, but there is a character, and I don't know if Miyazaki actually drew his character Nausicaa from the Odyssey, but there is a character of Nausicaa from the Odyssey. I'm assuming that Miyazaki was aware of this character. And she appears in the Odyssey to help Homer in his quest. He lands on an island, and I can't remember what island it is now, and he's a stranger on that island, and she finds him, and she basically helps him in not being kind of executed, but actually getting off the island and sent on his way home. So she is sort of this strong, brave character. She isn't very long in Homer's Odyssey. I would say she probably takes up 2 pages of story in the entire poem, and but it's just sort of like you get a glimpse of her in this, and I just think that it's very interesting to see her in another context. I've read the Odyssey many times, so for me it's not really that big of a deal, because I would read it anyway, because I generally or genuinely actually like reading Homer, but I think that just sort of that glimpse of Nausicaa in both places it's an interesting insight into the creation of this character, I think. And the last title that I recommend that you read together is Pink by Kyoko Okazaki and Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I actually did read these together last year. I actually read The Lord of the Flies last year as well. When I was reading Pink, I was really reminded of the film adaptation of Breakfast at Tiffany's. Now, I was very surprised by the short story or the novella of Breakfast at Tiffany's, because it is very different from the movie. So definitely you have to go in with a different expectation. Pink is the story of a young woman before Japan's bubble burst. So it's sort of like a time of excess, a time of, financial security, and this young woman is sort of living in this life of excess. She's living a life of casual freedom. She's not concerned about her future. She's not really she's not really self-aware. She's just sort of living this strange reality. And the main character, Holly Golightly, in Breakfast at Tiffany's, I think is a very similar character, if slightly more annoying. And I think that they kind of are living the same kind of perspective. So I feel like these two stories really speak to each other when you read them. Pink, I feel like, is actually kind of a slightly complicated story, because it is short and it is about a time period that isn't really represented much in manga. But I think that reading Breakfast at Tiffany's really aids in understanding what Pink is about. I think that these two titles really kind of aid in understanding each other. So that's it for my prose to manga comparisons, and I have 4 more pairs that I wanted to recommend to you. The first title that I want to recommend is QQ Sweeper by Kyosuke Motomi, and to read it with Alice 19th by Yu Watase. QQ Sweeper is sort of about being a soul's janitor. It's about going into the hearts of people who have real problems and cleaning them out. So like someone who is really angry or suicidal, or has real emotional angst. They go in with their brooms and they clean them out. Alice 19th is really similar in that these characters actually are going into the hearts of people, and they are going into this Wonderland type landscape. This also takes a lot of cues from Alice in Wonderland, so it probably could be read with that as well, but you go into these Wonderland type landscapes which are in the hearts of people, and you go in and you kind of, they go in and resolve those issues that that person is having. So they kind of, they use their kind of powers of love and hope and peace and words of communication to heal the hearts of people, but they actually go in the hearts to do this. So they're really similar. There's a similar kind of perspective in both of these manga. This one is new. It's complete in 3 volumes, but it is continuing in a new series called Queen's Quality, which is supposed to be coming out from Viz. So it is still ongoing. This one is a little bit older, but is also by Viz. But it's a fairly short series. But I do definitely see a lot of comparison between these two, and I would recommend that you read them together. These are both out of print titles, and you know, one of them is more popular than the other, but I think that they're an interesting pairing. And that is Chobits by Clamp and Karakuri Odette by Giulietta Suzuki. Giulietta Suzuki is the same author as Kami-sama Kiss, so you would be familiar with her about that. And Chobits is a fairly popular series. It's a seinen title, essentially about a society where personal computers or personal comms are humans. You can plug in and get all of your data through these human-like or humanoids or cyborgs or whatever. They exist sort of to help humans. And so a young man finds this Persicom on the street, and she's sort of broken, but he takes her home. They form a friendship and a slight romance, and it's sort of a little bit about how this personal computer kind of can become, I think, human in a way. And this one is really similar. This one is about a personal computer. You can see there's little cords and stuff hanging out of her head. And she, or a cyborg, and she is being sent by her maker to school to become human, to integrate with humans. And so there's this really similar theme, the similar character type. And so she's discovering what it means to be a human. The Chobits character is discovering what it means to be a human. I think this one is more of a romance than Karakuri Odette, but I think that they're really interesting to read side by side. They're not too similar, but they're also quite similar in a way, and you can see what direction either of these creators could have gone with their story. The next pairing that I recommend is reading Yona of the Dawn by Mizuho Kusanagi with Two Flowers for the Dragon by Nari Kusakawa. Now, this title isn't complete, and it is also out of print, so it might be maybe not the best thing for most people to read, but when I was reading this one, it felt a lot like this one. And you know, because I read Two Flowers for the Dragon so many years before this was released. Yona of the Dawn is pretty much about the princess of their country. The country is betrayed by someone close to her, and she has to escape and goes on basically a quest with her protector. This one is really similar, minus the quest. And the characters are really similar, the situations are similar, the romance so far is similar, even some of the character design is similar, despite the fact that, you know, Nari Kusakawa has a very different art style. There's a lot of similarities between the two. This one is more of a comedy, I think. But I really, when I was reading this, I felt so much like this that it was sort of like, I feel like because this one wasn't ever complete and sort of on a cliffhanger, that Yona of the Dawn actually kind of will satisfy, I'm hoping will satisfy my need to read Two Flowers for the Dragon. So I think that these would be good titles to read together. And my last pairing is going to be an unusual one, I think, for most of you. And that is Yu-Gi-Oh! By Kazuki Takahashi and King of Cards by Makoto Tateno. You probably know what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. It's essentially about a young boy. He's sort of possessed by a Egyptian spirit, and he plays card games that sort of come to life and does these one-on-one battles. I think that's pretty much the sum of it. This one is similar, except for that it is a shoujo series. It is about a young girl and she battles with cards, and there's more of a romance in it. It's just very strange when you see titles that are so similar coming from kind of a different perspective. So I definitely think that these are kind of fun to read together. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is definitely the better of the two titles. I won't deny you that at all. But it just is really fun to read King of Cards knowing Yu-Gi-Oh! And knowing that he's out there as well. Yeah, it's just sort of like a funny thing to read together. So that's it for my tag video. I had fun putting this together. Still have tons and tons of titles that I could talk about, at least manga-wise, that I think would be amazing to read together. But I thought these were some fun pairings that I thought that, you know, we might be interested in. Certainly not all that easy to find because I do have a lot of out-of-print titles in my collection, and that's what I tend to read a lot of. Certainly if you have any ideas of some good things that you think would be great to read together, I would love to hear it. I love to read things that relate to each other and see ideas compared across different stories. So I'd love to see that. If anyone else wants to do this video, I would love to see it. Let me know if you decide to do it and I will check out your video. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.